Chapter 1. The Cinder Child beneath twin suns that burned like unblinking eyes. The sands of Tatooine whispered of forgotten wounds. Nothing grew here except heat and memory. Winds carved the dunes like the Force carved destinies, without mercy, without pause. And there, in the shadow of rusted scrap and broken ships, a child was born. He did not scream. He arrived as silence, wrapped in dust, unclaimed by father or prophecy. The midwives did not understand. The Force had no need to explain. They called him Anakin, but names were only cages. What stirred inside him had no shape, no age, only hunger. A vergence, the Jedi would later call him. A convergence of light and shadow, wound into flesh. But on Tatooine he was just a slave, owned, barcoded, beaten when he cried, beaten when he didn't. His mother smiled so he wouldn't see her fear. He smiled back so she wouldn't see his dreams. He dreamed of stars. Not to escape, never that. He dreamed of pulling them down, of bending light into shapes, of walking among them like fire made flesh. When the sandstorms came and all others hid, he would stand and stare into the gale, unblinking. His soul did not fear ruin. It was ruin, waiting for a name. The Jedi arrived cloaked in prophecy. Qui-Gon Jinn, old, weary eyes, full of something not even the Council could name. He saw the child and felt the current shift. Anakin looked up and did not see a savior. He saw a door, one that would open or consume him. The test was given. The numbers were wrong. Too high, too ancient. The Force did not whisper, roared. Born without a father. Born of the Force, it was said, but perhaps not born at all. Perhaps conjured. A ripple in time where something else had tried to speak. Qui-Gon did not know it, but in choosing the boy, he chose a fault line in the galaxy. A fracture pretending to be fate. Watto would not sell the mother. So the boy left alone, his hands still trembling from farewell. His heart already learning the first lesson of the Jedi. Abandon those who need you most. Coruscant, towers, piercing clouds. A temple built on the bones of forgotten wars. They welcomed him, but not with joy. The Council saw danger. Yoda, old as stone, felt the darkness behind the boy's smile. Fear leads to anger, he said. But he did not know how deep the fear ran, how ancient the wound truly was. The boy was accepted, reluctantly, as if by permitting him, they could contain him. As if light could hold the storm, Padawan, learner. Hope, these were words given to Anakin like armor, but he wore them like chains. The Jedi trained him in the art of detachment, never knowing he had already detached from the Jedi themselves. They praised his power, feared it in secret, but Anakin only saw their limits, their rules, their refusal to feel what he felt. And deep below the temple, beneath marble and meditation, the dark side stirred. Not to corrupt him, but to awaken him. He built droids in his sleep. He dreamed of ships he'd never seen. The Force moved through him, not like breath, but like blood, thick and irreversible. Every command from his masters felt like delay. Every lesson a warning never meant for him. Obi-Wan, his teacher, saw promise, but never saw the storm. He tried to guide, tried to mold, but you cannot mold fire. You can only pray the forest does not burn. Yet it was not hatred that burned in Anakin's heart. Not yet. It was love. Love. For his mother, for the girl in the lake on Naboo, for the people dying in silence across the stars. But the Jedi called love weakness, and so love festered. It hid behind smiles. It twisted into fear of loss, and fear, like water held too long, turns stagnant, poisonous, quietly fatal. In the outer rim, darkness moved. Darth Sidious, still wearing the face of Chancellor Palpatine, watched and waited. He saw not a child, but a key, not to unlock the Force but to sever it. The boy would not need to be broken. He was already splitting. A living crack in the wall of light the Jedi built around themselves. All Sidious had to do was offer truth, and so the galaxy turned. Slow at first, like the coiling of a serpent. War brewed behind diplomacy. Armies were born in secret vats. A queen became a senator, a slave became a weapon, and a phantom menace began to take form. But in the quiet moments between lessons, between battles, between stars, Atten stared out at the void and wondered why he felt so hollow, why the dreams came sharper, why the voice beneath his thoughts did not speak, but waited, and the Force, ancient and wounded, held its breath. He was the chosen one, they said, meant to bring balance. But no one asked what balance truly meant. A scale cannot choose what it carries. It only obeys weight. And Anakin, even as a child, carried the weight of things yet to come. He would burn temples. He would kneel to monsters. He would kill children and whisper love as he did, but none of that had happened yet. For now, he was just a boy, staring at stars, holding a secret. And beneath Tatooine's twin suns, the cinder had begun to glow, and far across the galaxy, in a chamber lit by red glass and dark promises, a Sith Lord smiled, for the storm had been born, and it did not yet know its name. Chapter 2: The False. Dawn of peace. The Republic, vast and gleaming, stretched its limbs across the stars like an aging god too proud to notice its rot. Its towers glistened in the light of 1,000 systems, but the foundations beneath were soft with decay. Senators whispered oaths by day and bartered secrets by night. The people prayed to the idea of order, not knowing the bones beneath there. Cities had already begun to crack, and above it all, the Jedi watched not with vision, but with blindness earned by centuries of peace mistaken for truth. In the temple, they spoke of balance, of harmony, of the Force as river, as wind, as eternal light. But none remembered that light casts shadows, and the longer it shines, the longer the shadows grow. The Jedi code had become scripture, rigid and cold, attachment forbidden, emotion discouraged, passion treated as poison. They believed stillness was purity, but the Force was never still. It breathed, it wept, it burned, and in Anakin Skywalker it began to scream. Anakin, now a Padawan, moved through the halls with eyes too sharp and questions too deep. He obeyed, but not out of faith. He served, but not out of trust. He grew stronger with each passing day, and with each lesson, the cage around his soul tightened. The council smiled, but they did not see. Only Master Yoda, ancient and listening to ripples others ignored, felt the coming quake. Clouded this boy's future is, he murmured, but prophecy had already infected them. And prophecy is not. Guidance, it is gravity. They called him the Chosen One, meant to bring balance to the Force. But balance to whom? Balance for what? The Jedi never questioned the prophecy's origin. They only clung to it like a relic too sacred to touch. Some believed he would destroy the Sith. Others believed he would destroy them all. But none looked at the boy and saw a soul breaking under the weight of fate. War had not yet come. The clone army slept beneath Kamino's storms. The separatists had not yet risen. Palpatine still cloaked in benevolence, worked his threads in silence. But something had already changed. It moved slowly, like rot through roots. The Trade Federation had tested Naboo and found no resistance. The Senate faltered in unity. Planets began to whisper of independence. And in the shadows of Coruscant, secret orders were being drafted in blood. Anakin did not feel peace. He felt heat. He felt friction. In his chambers, he dreamed of his mother lone, afraid, calling to him from across the stars. But the Jedi forbade attachment, so he spoke of it to no one. He buried his dread beneath duty. He drowned his fear beneath obedience. But the Force did not forget. It pulsed around him like a storm waiting to break. And something far older than prophecy began to notice. Palpatine watched him closely. The Chancellor played the part of father, friend, mentor. He gave Anakin what the Jedi would not: recognition, praise, the illusion of control. "You are strong," he would whisper, "wiser than they see." Each compliment was a chisel, cracking the foundation of loyalty beneath Anakin's feet. Not lies truths twisted with precision. Sidious needed no spells. He only needed to listen. Obi-1, now a knight, struggled to teach a student who felt more like fire than flesh. He saw Anakin's defiance as immaturity. He saw the temper, the pride, the compassion as wild branches to be trimmed. But Obi-Wan was not a gardener. He was a brother, not a father. He taught as he had been taught, blind to the fact that this boy had never known peace, that he did not fear the dark because the dark had raised him, and Padme returned. Senator of Naboo, now wrapped in silken duty, but her presence still made Anakin's voice falter. They spoke in shadows. Their eyes met in silence. He loved her with a fire the Jedi could not name. She loved him with a hope she could not admit. It was not a romance, it was a ritual, a rebellion wrapped in longing. Every glance was a betrayal, every touch a wound waiting to open. Peace became a performance. In the Senate, Palpatine spoke of unity. In hidden tombs, beneath Moraband and whispers lost in the unknown regions, ancient Sith memories stirred. Holocrons glowed faintly, as if sensing the pulse of something once buried, now rising. Darth Bane's rule of two had survived, not through armies, but through patience. And now, the plan neared its final act. Sidious watched the Jedi grow proud. He watched Anakin grow restless. He knew the Jedi would destroy themselves trying to control what they could not understand. Still, the Republic held its illusion. Glittered, diplomats toasted empty victories. Jedi trained younglings with careful smiles. But none could see the wound widening beneath them. None could feel the pressure building in the boy they called chosen. And Anakin, he stared at the temple spires and wondered why they felt like prison bars. He stared at the stars and wondered if he would ever be free. He felt something coming, not an event, a change, a turning. And the Force, for the first time, felt cold. Peace, like glass, reflects only until it cracks. And when it does, the reflection turns monstrous. The Jedi believed the galaxy was stable, but they did not see that the child they had raised in chains now held the key to collapse. The dawn had come, but it was false. Not morning, just the last light before the fall. And far above them, behind closed doors, Darth Sidious smiled again, for the Republic's end would not come with war, but with a whisper. Chapter 3. The veins of war begin to pulse. The galaxy is not made of stars, is made of wounds. Ancient, layered, unhealed. The Jedi believed they had sealed them long ago, but in truth, They had only silenced the screams. Now the echoes were returning, and the Republic's veins began to pulse with the slow rhythm of war. There were no battles. At first, only whispers. A trade route closed. A planet voted to secede. A senator disappeared. But the pattern was forming, like cracks in ancient stone, spiderwebbing across systems no longer bound by unity. Separatist movements rose like smoke. Discontent twisted into militias. The Jedi were dispatched not as keepers of peace, but as enforcers of fear. And with every mission, they slipped further from the force they swore to protect. Anakin grew sharper. The boy was fading, and in his place stood something neither child nor man. He moved with purpose now, blade and instinct fused. His victories came easily to easily, but each triumph carved something out of him. He smiled, but it no longer reached his eyes. He obeyed, but his thoughts were his own. And in those thoughts, he questioned everything, especially the Jedi. Noticed the change, but could not name it. He watched his apprentice grow more powerful with each passing year, but also more distant. Anakin spoke of dreams, of death, of the outer rim, of a mother left behind. Obi-Wan reminded him of the code, of detachment, of purpose. But Anakin had already begun to hear another voice, one that spoke not of restraint, but of justice. Padme remained a secret carved into his bones. She wore the mask of a senator by day, and at night her voice was the only anchor Anakin trusted. Their love was not hidden from the force it was woven into it. It did not burn, it smoldered. Quiet, heavy, sacred. The Jedi would never understand, and so Anakin told them nothing. The cracks widened. Across the stars, a phantom pulled strings. Darth Sidious, Chancellor Palpatine, Master of Masks. He needed no armies, not yet. Only fear, only confusion. He fed the separatist cause with whispers, promised them freedom, promised them power. And they obeyed, never knowing he also controlled the Republic. A war was coming, but there would be no sides. Only puppets, only corpses. The Jedi Council felt the tremors, but they mistook them for ripples. They debated policy, not prophecy. Yoda meditated for hours in silence, but the darkness coiled beneath his feet, silent and patient. Mace Windu scoured the Senate chambers with suspicion, but every trail led to walls to clean. They knew something was wrong, but they did not know how wrong, and they did not know how close. Then came Camino, a planet erased from the archives, a storm-racked ocean hiding an army. Clones, all wearing the same face. Django, Fett bounty hunter. Killer, donor. Commissioned not by the Republic, but in the name of the Jedi. The mystery wrapped itself in silence. Who had ordered it? Why? The answers were lost, buried in layers of deception too ancient to unweave. But war was no longer waiting. Geonosis lit the match. A Jedi rescue turned into slaughter. Droids swarmed the arena. Count Dooku, once Jedi Master, now led the Separatists. He spoke not of power, but of truth. He warned Obi-Wan of a Sith controlling the Senate. Obi-Wan did not believe him. He could not. Because if it was true, everything would unravel, and so it did. The Clone Wars began not with declaration, but with thunder. Gunships roared, sabers clashed. The first battle claimed thousands. The Republic, unready, embraced its manufactured army without question. The Jedi, untrained in war, became generals overnight. And Anakin became something new. He killed not with hesitation, but with purpose. His skill was unmatched, his fury barely contained. The clones obeyed him without question. The Senate praised him. The people adored him. The Jedi tried to control him, but Anakin had already stopped listening. The war had given him permission to become what he had always been. Pand watched him change. She feared it, but loved him too much to stop it. Love does not see clearly, it only sees closely. He spoke to her of nightmares, of his mother, of pain. She held him, whispered comfort, but her arms could not hold back fate. The Force was moving. Now louder, darker, deeper. On Tatooine, Shmi Skywalker cried out one final time. Anakin felt her pain like a blade to the soul. He raced to her, broke laws to reach her. He held her as she died. And then he slaughtered them, the raiders, the tribe, the innocent. All of them, not in anger, in despair, in silence. The fire inside him did not roar. It hemmed. He told no one but Padmé. And the Force shuddered. Dooku grew bolder. The Separatists gained ground. The Senate expanded Palpatine's powers with each crisis, emergency measures, supreme authority. Temporary, they said. Necessary, they believed. But each step forward was a step deeper into the grave. The Jedi now fought across 1,000 worlds. Their numbers thinned. Their eyes darkened. The line between protector and soldier vanished. Every duel became prophecy. Every mission a test. The dark side did not hide anymore. It marched, and Anakin rose through it all, decorated, celebrated, feared, yet always uncertain. He felt the Force changing around him, not betraying him, but revealing itself. It was not light or dark. It was hunger. It was survival. And somewhere within it, he heard the voice again. Sidious did not speak yet. He only watched. Anakin's fury would not be caged by ideology. His love would not be erased by creed. He was already more than Jedi, more than soldier. He was becoming what the Sith had long awaited, a god in pain. The Republic did not fall. It bled, slowly, quietly. Each clone deployed was another nail. Each speech by Palpatine, another chain. The Jedi, too noble to see their own corruption, marched in line. They had become what they feared, tools of order without vision, and Anakin, walking through fire and victory, could no longer tell which side he served, only that he was moving toward something he did not yet understand, and somewhere deep within him, the Force waited for its shatterpoint. Chapter 4. Love woven in silence. War sown in lighting times of war. Love becomes a heresy, and in the heart of Anakin Skywalker, love was a secret altar built, not in light, but in silence. As the galaxy ignited, and clones marched to the rhythm of planetary collapse, his soul turned not toward the Jedi nor the Senate, but toward her, Padmé, queen no longer. Now senator, now symbol, now sanctuary. The galaxy would never know how close it came to salvation, how close it came to ruin with every touch of her hand. They met in corridors, shadows, the hush between missions. The war gave them windows, narrow and desperate. Their union was not one of courtship, but collision. There were no vows, only trembled confessions. No temple, only stars. And when they wed in secret, it was not celebration, it was surrender. A surrender to a truth the Jedi forbade and the Senate could never allow. A love not permitted by any order, but one that pulsed through the Force like a wound refusing to close. Anakin did not ask whether it was right. He had already seen the cost of inaction. His mother's death had taught him that love denied is just grief delayed. And so he clung to Padma, not as partner, but as lifeline. She was not his weakness. She was his reason to remain human. The Jedi knew nothing. They saw his growing restlessness. The Clone Wars devoured world after world. Kamino grew darker. The Separatists pushed deeper. Jedi died by dozens, their bodies buried without mourning, their names forgotten before the next campaign. Dooku vanished into the shadows, and Grievous rose from them, a creature of metal, madness, and slaughter. The Jedi were now warriors, their robes stained with battlefield ash. Their temple, once sanctuary, now briefing hall. They no longer spoke of peace, they spoke of victory, and victory cost them everything. Anakin's legend swelled. Skywalker the hero, the butcher of Geonosis, the savior of Christophas. The people adored him. His soldiers followed him into fire. He won battles the Council could not, with tactics they would not endorse. But with each triumph, the shadow behind him lengthened. And within that shadow, Sidious smiled. Palpatine, still cloaked in fatherly charm, now drew Anakin closer. They dined, they spoke, they shared secrets no Jedi would offer. He told Anakin the truth, that the Jedi feared him, that they would never let him rise. That power was not corruption, it was clarity. Sidious spoke not as a Sith, but as a prophet of change. And Anakin listened, not because he trusted Palpatine, but because no one else told him what he already felt. The Council grew suspicious. They whispered of control, of watching the Chancellor, of spying, and so they sent Anakin to observe, him to become a tool of their distrust. But Anakin was no longer theirs. He had already begun to fracture between Parbum and the war. Between the Jedi and Palpatine, between what he was and what he might become. Then came the dream Parbum, dying in childbirth, her voice echoing through the Force, gasping, reaching, fading. It was not a vision, it was a commandment, a future etched in flame. And Anakin, already trembling from the weight of everything, collapsed beneath it. He had sworn never to lose again. Not his mother, not Padme, not this child. He would burn the stars before allowing fate to repeat itself. He told no one, not Padme, not Obi-Wan, not even the Council, but the fear bled through him, slow and corrosive. Every breath became a countdown, every mission an interruption. The war became background noise. The only battle that mattered was yet to come, the battle for her life. Sidious knew. He began to whisper truths too precise to be coincidence. Of ancient Sith who conquered death, of powers lost to time, of secrets the Jedi feared. He offered no answers, only hints. But Anakin heard what he needed. Salvation, control, not for conquest, but for love. The war reached Coruscant. Grievous attacked. The Chancellor was captured. The trap closed, wrapped in chaos and necessity. Obi-Wan and Anakin flew into the fire to retrieve him. Dooku awaited them. The duel was swift. Anakin disarmed him, and then, at Palpatine's urging, he executed him. Not in anger, not in revenge, in silence. The Jedi praised his success. The Senate called it triumph, but something had died in that moment. Not Dooku, Anakin. A part of him, quiet and weary, fell away. He told himself it was justice, but the Force whispered otherwise. Padme greeted him with joy. He held her as if she might vanish. Her breath against his ear was the only sound he trusted. He confessed his dreams. She wept. She believed he was strong enough to stop it. But strength is not salvation, and fate is not moved by love alone. The Jedi Council began to fracture. They refused to grant Anakin the rank of master. They spoke of caution, of wariness, of Palpatine's growing reach, but Anakin heard only betrayal. The one who had saved them, now silenced. The one who had given everything, now restrained. Palpatine saw it and smiled. The web had been spun. War was no longer the end. It was the beginning of unraveling. The Republic stood only in name. The Jedi trusted only tradition. The boy from Tatooine, forged in pain and prophecy, stood at the edge of something vast and final, and Padme, still unaware of the storm behind his eyes, placed his hand over her womb and whispered, "There's more than one. 2 heartbeats, 2 futures, and only one choice left to make." Chapter 5. The clone seeds bloom with blood. They were born without mothers, grown in silence, bred for obedience. Millions of identical faces, each carrying the same voice, the same armor, the same purpose. Clones. Soldiers designed not to think, but to serve. Their creation was not a miracle. It was a curse spoken in advance by a dead Jedi and carried out in the shadows. Kamino was their womb, the war their cradle, and death their inheritance. The Jedi called them comrades. The Senate called them tools. The people called them heroes. But none asked why they existed. None questioned how an army had appeared before the war had even begun. The Republic embraced the clones as if fate had answered a prayer, but the Force whispered a deeper truth. This was no answer. This was design. The Clone Wars surged across the galaxy. Jedi became generals. Lightsabers became commands. Wisdom gave way to strategy. Peacekeepers were now architects of destruction. Entire systems burned. Planets changed allegiance with each battle. Families were torn from orbit. And always the clones marched. Loyal, relentless. Without question, Anakin Skywalker led them like no other. His presence was war incarnate. Clones cheered his name. His victories were swift, devastating, brutal. He fought not with calculation, but instinct. He moved as if guided by something deeper than thought. The Force swirled around him like a storm, but it did not comfort. It fed. He trusted his men. He named them, spoke to them, ate with them. To the clones, he was not a Jedi, he was theirs. And yet, even as he forged bonds with soldiers made to die, he never asked where they had come from. He did not question their creation, because victory had no time for questions, and love had no space for doubt. Pam watched from afar, still, hidden, still glowing with the quiet terror of impending motherhood. She saw what the war was doing to him, to everyone. The Senate chambers were now arenas of fear. Bills passed with trembling hands. Freedoms were suspended in the name of survival. Palpatine's power grew with each sunrise. Emergency measures that never expired. Powers extended, never returned. The Jedi grew uneasy. Yoda sensed imbalance, but could not see the source. Mace Windu saw shadows moving within the Senate, but could not pierce the veil. They debated Palpatine's control. They suspected treachery, but moved cautiously, too cautiously. Their greatest mistake was not inaction, it was arrogance. The belief that the Force would warn them before the end. But the Force had already warned them. In the child, in the army, in the storm that was Anakin Skywalker. He began to feel it, the shift, the edges of the Jedi code fraying beneath his skin. He obeyed, but without belief. He served, but with growing fury. They made him sit on the council, but not as a master. They granted him honor, but denied him trust. He was a Jedi in title, but in truth he was adrift. And then came the wound Ahsoka Tano, his Padawan, his shadow, his sister. Falsely accused, imprisoned, betrayed, the Jedi turned from her when she needed them most. When the truth surfaced, it was too late. She left the Order, left him, and in her leaving, something inside Anakin tore beyond repair. He had begged her to stay. She had looked him in the eyes and said, "I know." He would never forgive the Jedi for what they did, or for what they didn't do. Palpatine saw it. He stepped in as the Jedi stepped back. His mentorship became more intimate, his words more precise. He spoke of loss, of the limits of the Jedi, of the power that lay just beyond their code. He told Anakin that justice required strength, that peace required control, that love was not weakness, but reason. And then came the dream again. Padme dying, clutching her belly, reaching for him, calling his name with fading breath. He woke in sweat, in fear, the same fear that had taken his mother, that had taken Ahsoka, that would now take Padme. The Force was not comforting him, it was warning him, and he did not know how to stop it, but Palpatine did. He spoke of Darth Plagueis, a Sith who could save the ones he loved from death, not a myth, a memory. Forbidden knowledge, passed from master to apprentice. The Jedi would never teach such power, but the Sith had embraced it. Palpatine offered no training, only the promise of it. And to Anakin the promise was enough. He began to drift from the Order in spirit, if not in name. His faith was no longer in their creed. It was in the possibility of saving her. He would do anything, surrender any truth, kill any enemy, serve any master, just to hold her hand and feel it warm after birth. And all across the galaxy, the clones kept dying. More were grown, faster, cheaper. The war fed itself, a machine of attrition. The Jedi, once guardians of life, now sent thousands to die in battles, and far beneath Kamino's oceans, the seeds waited. Not for growth, not for victory, for harvest. Chapter 6. The Temple of 1,000 Ghosts. The Jedi Temple rose high above Coruscant, built like a blade toward the stars. Once it had been a beacon, a sanctuary of wisdom. Its halls shimmered with the footsteps of thousands who carried the Force in their blood. But now its light was dim, its silence heavy. The war had hollowed its heart, its chambers were cold with fear, and in its very foundations the dark side had begun to stir. Yoda felt it. Mace Windu did too. A tremor beneath the surface of things. The Force no longer whispered as it once had. It screamed and echoed, or worse, said nothing at all. Visions came clouded. Premonitions vanished before clarity. The dark was not approaching. It was already here, hiding in the folds of robes and the creases of trust. Still, the Council debated. Still, they tried to preserve the illusion that they could win, that the clones were loyal, that the war was just. But every decision they made, every deployment, every compromise, every silence was a wound in the Force that bled deeper than they knew. Anakin stalked the temple like a restless storm. The boy who once sprinted through its corridors in awe now moved through it in dread. He no longer belonged. He saw the walls differently, felt their weight. They were not sacred, they were prison bars. And the Council, once mentors, now felt like gatekeepers. What he asked, they denied. What he offered, they questioned. They had stripped Ahsoka of her faith. They had denied him the rank of master. They had shown him that loyalty was not returned, so he turned elsewhere, to the Chancellor, to Palpatine. Palpatine, whose voice was calm while the galaxy screamed. Palpatine, who listened while others judged. Palpatine, who offered the one thing the Jedi never would understanding. He knew what Anakin feared, what he loved, what he dreamed. And he used all of it like a sculptor uses clay. The temple archives held thousands of years of knowledge, but they could not show Anakin how to save Padme. They could not tell him how to stop death. The answers he sought were not among the Jedi, so he began to search beyond them, in shadows, in whispers, in forbidden thoughts that grew like roots. Beneath his skin, and beneath all things, the Sith watched. Darth Sidious had played a long game, longer than any had known. While Jedi meditated, he maneuvered. While they preached balance, he mastered imbalance. The temple had stood tall for 1,000 generations, but it would not survive a single betrayal, not when that betrayal came. From within, the war crept closer to Coruscant. Outer Rim sieges tightened. Jedi fell every day, and Anakin began to see visions, not just of Padme dying, but of fire, of sabers against younglings, of his own hands soaked in blood. At first, he recoiled. Then he looked deeper. What if this was the cost? What if peace demanded it? He told no one of these dreams, not even her, Mace. Windu grew suspicious. The Chancellor held his power too tightly. He did not surrender it, even as the war waned. The Jedi moved to act, but too late. Anakin was already caught in the grip of destiny. He was no longer the learner. He was the fulcrum, and the Force bent around him. Sidious revealed himself in darkness, not fearfully, but confidently. He did not beg, he did not plead. He offered an ancient truth, dressed in calm words. The Jedi would never understand. But Anakin did. He could feel it. The two sides were not light and dark, they were chains and freedom. And the Sith had no chains. He hesitated. But not long, he told Mace Windu, and Mace moved swiftly, blade ready. Anakin followed, but not with trust, with uncertainty, with fear. And in that moment, everything was decided. The temple stood quiet, but the storm had already broken. When Windu struck to end Sidious, Anakin intervened, not to save the Sith, but to save Padme. In a single scream, a saber, a foremace, was gone. The last true wall had shattered, and Anakin knelt, not to Sidious, but to purpose, to power, to inevitability. He was no longer Jedi. He was apprentice. He was reborn. He was Vader, and the temple waited. The Chancellor called for Order 66, a phrase, a key, and every clone across the stars obeyed. The same soldiers who had fought beside Jedi turned in perfect unison, not in anger, not in rage, in silence. Blasters raised, and the Jedi fell, one by one, across the Outer Rim, on worlds they had saved, in battles they had led. They were gunned down by the very army they had trusted. The Force cried out, but too late. Coruscant shook. The temple, once a place of learning, became a slaughterhouse. Anakin led the assault himself, clad in black, eyes burning. He walked through its gates, not as a son returning home, but as the shadow of death. Younglings ran, masters resisted, but none could stop him. He ignited his saber. The ghosts began to form that day, not spirits, echoes, screams, trapped in stone, lights that would never flicker again. The temple became a crypt, and the stars above Coruscant looked down upon a silence that would never lift. Yoda felt it across the stars. Obi-Wan, too, a wound beyond healing. The Order had fallen, not in battle, in betrayal. In design, the Sith had won, and still Padme waited, still believing he would come home, that the dreams were wrong, that he could not become that thing. But the temple stood burning in the distance, and her child kicked Chapter 7, the twilight of peace in the skies above Coruscant. Silence was a lie. Smoke curled like fingers from the Jedi Temple, and the city below blinked in artificial light, blind to the nightmare unfolding above. The Grand Republic still stood, but only in name. Its heart had been ripped out quietly, behind closed doors, by hands it trusted most, and now the body walked without a soul. The temple was cold ash, a monument of silence. The young had cried, the old had fought, but none were spared. The clones, once brothers to the Jedi, marched through blood without pause. And behind them, the shadow in black, Darth Vader, born not in darkness, but in a twisted love that dared to defy death. Padme Amidala stared from her balcony, the wind carrying the smoke across her cheek. She did not yet know what had happened, but she felt it, a severing, a silence. In the Force where once there had been hope, the man she loved was vanishing, not gone but unreachable, like a star behind a dying sun. The Senate still met, the Chancellor still spoke, and the people still believed. They believed the Jedi had turned traitor, that they had tried to assassinate their leader, that the Clone War had brought them to the edge of chaos, and only one voice could guide them back. Palpatine stood before the Galactic Senate and told them the truth, twisted sideways. With scars carved by his own lightning, he played the victim. With sorrow in his voice, he declared an end to the war, and with perfect gravity, he announced the birth of a new order, a safer galaxy, a stronger one. An empire, the thunder of applause drowned out the death of freedom. So easily it fell, so easily they cheered. Senators, loyalists, fearful citizens, they welcomed the chains because the chains came wrapped in peace, the very peace that Padme once fought to protect. And now, in her final hour as a senator, she looked on in silence. She did not cry, she did not stand. Her voice failed her for the first time in her life. "So this is how liberty dies," she whispered, with thunderous applause. Obi-Wan Kenobi survived, so did Yoda. Across the galaxy, few Jedi escaped the purge. Fewer still knew where to run. The temple was gone. The Republic was gone. And in their place stood something colder, hungrier. Ancient Vader hunted survivors like ghosts in a graveyard. One by one, he silenced the last voices of the Jedi. His saber did not tremble. His eyes no longer wept. And yet, inside, the boy still screamed, buried, chained, suffocating beneath the weight of his own choice. He thought it would bring her peace. He thought it would save her. But the dreams returned. Stronger, clearer, death hovered above Padme like a shroud. Not from an assassin, not from an enemy, but from him. Palpatine smiled, always nearby, always watching. He did not need chains. To bind Vader, he had only to speak. "It is your destiny," he whispered, and Vader believed him, because what else could he do? A secret grew in Padme's womb, twins, a hope hidden from both, Sith and war, unseen, unnamed, but not forgotten by the Force. The galaxy had not lost its balance. It had only shifted its weight. And deep in the She boarded a ship, pregnant and alone, and fled to Polis Massa, far from the Empire's gaze. But the damage had already been done. The pain within her was not physical, it was soul-deep. She had loved him too much, and he had loved her too. Desperately, he arrived too late. Vader found only absence. Her apartment cold, her voice gone. The droid told him nothing. The stars offered no clues. He reached into the Force, but heard only echoes. His rage grew sharp, his sorrow buried, his past denied. Padme gave birth, surrounded by machines. One child born with fire in his blood, the other with wisdom in her eyes. Luke and Leia, they cried not for themselves, but for the world they had entered. She looked at them, smiled once, whispered, "There is still good in him." And then she died, not from wounds, from heartbreak, and Vader felt it. Somewhere across the void, he knew. He screamed, but not with words, with the Force itself, a storm of fury, of denial. Droids repaired his ruined body. Machines sealed the man inside the metal. When the mask came down, he was no longer human. The fire had consumed him. "Where is Padme?" he asked. Palpatine told him she was dead, that it was his anger that killed her. And in that moment, Vader broke. Not just his body, but the last fragment of the man he had been. The room shattered. The voice cried, and the Emperor smiled. The galaxy knew peace, now, not the peace of harmony, but the peace of fear, of obedience, of silence. Twilight had come, and the night was long. Chapter 8. Beneath the Emperor's throne, the galaxy slept. With open eyes, beneath the black banners of the Empire, order reigned not by justice, but by terror. The Senate still convened, but its voice had no teeth. Palpatine ruled now from the highest spire of Coruscant, seated atop the corpse of the Republic. His throne, unseen by the masses, was carved from betrayal. Below that throne, in chambers no map recorded, rituals older than the Republic itself unfolded in darkness. There, the Emperor fed his power, not from armies, not from laws, but from pain, from sacrifice, from secrets not even the Jedi had dared to name. The Sith had returned, not just to power, but to purpose, no longer mere shadows. Now they were the storm. Palpatine was no longer a man. His flesh had twisted, not by age, but by choice. The dark side had seeped into every pore. His voice, soft and serpentine, could wither courage. His eyes burned yellow, not from anger, but from hunger, eternal, endless, insatiable. Darth Vader stood beside him, cloaked in silence. His breath, mechanical and measured, became the sound of fear across 1,000 worlds. Yet beneath the armor there was no peace. Only regret without mercy, pain without end. The man had died. The ghost remained. Palpatine kept him close, not out of trust, but out of control. Vader was power, yes, but also a symbol, a warning to others, and to himself. The armor was his punishment, his prison, his promise. The children were gone, hidden, lost in the currents of the Force. The Emperor searched, but not too quickly. He had time. Time to build his dominion. Time to reshape the galaxy. Time to prepare for something darker still. For beneath his throne, Palpatine had begun experiments, not on science, but on souls. The Sith cared not for blasters or starships. Their dominion was deeper. They sought immortality. Not the kind that lived forever, but the kind that could not die. Camino was abandoned. Cloning was a broken tool. What he needed was essence, spirit, the secret of life itself. The gift his master, Plagueis, once pursued. And so he dug into ancient Sith texts, artifacts stolen from Jedi vaults, holocrons cracked open like tombs. And below the palace, in laboratories drenched in shadow, the Emperor practiced what even Plagueis had feared. He fractured lives, split minds, pulled the Force apart like threads in a tapestry. Entire species were harvested for their sensitivity. Infants disappeared. Temples on distant moons were drained of energy. Sith alchemy returned from myth to reality. Vader knew, but he said nothing. He had seen what resistance brought. He obeyed. He hunted survivors. He enforced rule. He killed without question. And still the pain remained. Across the stars, small fires flickered. Not yet a rebellion, but the idea of one. Whispers in alleyways. Slices of resistance hidden in songs and stories. In every world crushed beneath imperial boots, a name was spoken in secret. Skywalker, not as a curse, but as a question. The Jedi were gone, but the Force was not. Bail Organa adopted the girl. Leia, she grew behind palace walls, unaware of her origin, trained in diplomacy but born with fire in her blood. She stared at stars and dreamed of justice. OBI-1 watched from afar, guarding the boy. Luke. Tatooine swallowed him in dust. He knew only work, not destiny. But sometimes, when the suns set just right, he felt a presence inside him he could not name. Palpatine feared them, not because of who they were, but because of what they could become. Yet he did not strike. Not yet. He waited. He studied the stars. He peered beyond death itself, into realms the Jedi had denied. He listened to echoes in the unknown regions, whispers of ancient powers slumbering in the void. Darker even than the Sith, he sought mastery, not just of the galaxy, but of existence. The galaxy tightened. Freedoms vanished. Languages were erased. Planets were scorched. Every failure, every rebellion, every breath of resistance met with flame. And yet, in silence, the Force stirred. It had not abandoned. The galaxy, it was waiting, watching, preparing to correct the balance. Vader sometimes paused, in silence. At night, he would stand at the edge of a starship hangar, stare into the void, and feel a weight he could. Not name, not guilt, not hope, just absence. Padme's voice, once so clear, had grown distant. Her name now burned him more than the Emperor's lightning ever could, but he clung to it, like ash clings to fire, like breath clings to a dying body. Palpatine sensed it and warned him, "Let the past die, my friend. You serve the future now. You serve me." And Vader bowed, because that was all he had left. The people forgot, not because they wanted to, but because they were made to. History was rewritten. The Jedi were erased. The Republic became a fairy tale. The Emperor became myth eternal, untouchable. But myths are dangerous because they never die. Beneath the Emperor's throne, in a vault no one entered, a single object remained untouched. A lightsaber burned black, broken at the hilt. The weapon of Anakin Skywalker. Palpatine kept it not as a trophy, but as a tether, a reminder that even gods can fall. But somewhere in the dust of forgotten planets, destiny gathered, unseen, unfelt. A tremor in the force, small but growing, and far from Coruscant, in the quiet sands of a forgotten desert. A boy looked up at the stars and wondered who he truly was. The answer would shake the empire. Chapter 9. The Boy in the Wasteland. He was born beneath twin suns, but raised in shadow. The desert did not care for dreams. Tatooine was a wasteland of silence and ruin, where water was more precious than truth, and names were lost to the wind. Yet in the midst of dust and heat, a boy grew, not with power, not with prophecy, but with questions that had no answers. His name was Luke. He did not know why he looked at the stars longer than the others, why something in his blood ached when he stared at the horizon. He only knew that the sky whispered to him, not with words, but with hunger. His uncle feared that hunger, Owen, Lars, had buried the truth beneath layers of silence. He watched Luke with quiet dread, not because of what the boy was, but because of what he might become. He saw the fire in his eyes, and remembered the day Anakin Skywalker came home to bury his mother. Owen had seen what power looked like, unchained, and he had never forgotten. Beru tried to offer warmth, but it was a fading warmth, like sunlight. On dying stone, they gave Luke rules, boundaries, a name that was not his own. But none of it could smother the pull he felt like gravity, like fate. He was the son of a ghost that still haunted the galaxy OBI-1 watched from the dunes. No longer a general, no longer a Jedi Knight, just a man worn by war, burned by failure, and kept alive by one final purpose: protect the boy, train him when the time came. If the time came, he had buried his saber deep in the sands, beside his faith. But the Force does not forget its children, and she was not afraid to say so. Darth Vader watched the stars, sensing a shift, a pressure, as if something long buried was beginning to stir. He did not know his son lived, but the Force had begun to whisper again, her voice softer now, but insistent. He remembered Padma's final words. There is still good in him, and he hated them, because they refused to die. Meanwhile, Kenobi waited, alone, listening, watching aging beneath the twin suns that had once bathed Anakin's smile. The desert had hollowed him out, but something within him still burned him, but unbroken. One day, he knew, the boy would need him, and the war would begin again. But for now, Luke was still only a boy, still innocent, still unarmed. He knew nothing of lightsabers, of Jedi temples, of Sith Lords and galactic wars. But when the wind howled through the canyons, when the stars shivered above the dune sea, he felt something stir in his blood, something old, something vast, and somewhere in the ruins of his father's legacy, the Force began to gather. It began with a droid, an artifact of war, bearing a message from a ghost. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. And the boy listened, and the desert answered. Chapter 10. The Ghost and the Flame. The desert does not keep secrets forever. Beneath its silence, something stirred. A droid rolled through the canyons, ancient data buried in its heart, a message from a forgotten bloodline, a plea carved from rebellion. It wandered alone as the Force guided its wheels across sand and ruin. The boy found it, or perhaps it found the boy. R2-D2 did not speak in words, but in echoes. The sound of war, the memory of fire, the last breath of a dying queen preserved in circuits, whispered in blue light. Leia's image flickered before Luke, like a dream he did not understand. Her voice soft, noble, pleading. She spoke of war, But Luke heard destiny. He had never heard the name Obi-Wan before, not in full, not in truth. But the desert had eyes, and one of them was always watching, the hermit, the wizard, the ghost of another age. Ben.Obi-1 knew the time had come, not because he wished it, but because he had dreamed it for too long. He had waited 19 years for this moment, cursed with patience, starved of hope. Now the force moved again, and he had no more excuses to hide. He brought the boy into his cave, and with trembling hands, opened the past. The saber hummed, ancient, sacred, silent. It belonged to a man now lost. It shimmered with a color Luke had never seen, yet felt in his marrow, blue like the sky before a storm. He held it like a relic, not a weapon. It was his father's blade, and the lie began. Obi-1 did not speak the name Vader. Not yet. He spoke only of a Jedi Knight, brave and good, a friend, a warrior, a guardian of peace. He spoke of clone wars, of the republic that was, of the flame that had gone out in the galaxy. He told Luke that Anakin Skywalker was dead. From a certain point of view, it was true. But in truth, Anakin lived in shadow, a machine with a broken heart, a monster who did not sleep, a blade without a soul. And yet, Luke felt only wonder. The word Jedi rang through him, like a bell across time. He did not yet know the cost. The storm came quickly. Stormtroopers, sand scorchers, flame rifles. The Empire had arrived on Tatooine in search of a stolen secret. But in their path stood only a boy, a ghost, and a droid that had seen too much by the time the smoke cleared. Dalar's homestead was nothing but Ashdod, Owen, and Beru gone, vaporized by fear, erased by power. And Luke stood in the ruins of everything he knew. His eyes, once full of stars, now held something deeper. He had no home now, no farm, no family, only the saber, only the flame, only the ghost that waited beside him, offering him a path older than time. Come with me to Alderaan, Obi-Wan said. Learn the ways of the Force. Luke did not understand the Force, but it had already begun to sing to him in dreams, in fire, in the silence between heartbeats. And so he followed, not as a warrior, not yet, but as a question. What am I? What am I becoming? They boarded a ship that smelled of rust and smuggling, the Millennium Falcon, a vessel of chance and change. Its captain, Han Solo, believed in nothing. His co-pilot, Chewbacca, spoke in growls and loyalty. They were rogues, but the galaxy was forged by rogues. Alderaan was already dying. The Death Star, a blade in the sky, loomed in orbit. Its name was not a metaphor. It was truth. It drank planets. It silenced systems. And in the dark throne room of that floating tomb, Vader stood beside the Emperor's second shadow, Tarkin, the architect of fear. Leia had been captured, tortured, but unbroken. Her will did not bend. Her words did not tremble. She had the blood of Skywalker and Organa in her veins, fire and steel. They destroyed her homeworld, but her soul remained. Whole, Luke felt her presence before he met her. The Force does not forget family. Inside the belly of the Death Star, destiny wove its knots. The boy, the smuggler, the droids, and the last Jedi ghost moved like sparks across black stone. They found the princess, freed her, fought through corridors of metal and death, and then the ghost turned to face the darkness. Obi-Wan knew his time had ended. He did not fight to win. He fought to become more than a man. Vader struck him down, blade to blade, as the boy watched from across the hangar. And where once a body had stood, there was only silence. But the ghost had not died. It had only stepped deeper into the Force. Luke screamed, but the voice of Obi-Wan did not vanish. "Run," it said. "You are not ready," and the flame within Luke flickered but did not fade. Chapter 11. The Temple Without Walls. The stars moved in silence. But the Force did not sleep. Luke sat beneath their ancient glow, the weight of a saber on his knee, the echo of a voice in his mind. Obi-Wan had died, but had not vanished. The voice remained, soft and eternal, guiding him between the cracks of time. He did not understand it, but he obeyed it. The galaxy had become a wound. Alderaan was gone, a planet devoured by logic and fire. The rebellion, scattered and hunted, now gathered in hidden places, carving fortresses from frost and shadow. The Empire had no mercy for whispers of freedom. But the boy had seen the face of the machine, and he had survived it. He had seen Leia full of rage and purpose. He had seen Han fighting, not for belief, but for those he could not leave behind. He had seen Chewbacca grieve in silence, and the droids speak in sparks and loyalty. The Death Star had been destroyed, but the wound had not healed. The wound had only opened wider. They had struck the heart of the Empire and survived. But something darker had awakened. The Emperor now watched with both eyes open. He had known of Skywalker long before the boy held a saber, but now the truth burned in him like prophecy. The son of Anakin had emerged just as the Sith had foreseen, and where one Skywalker fell, another now rose unguarded, untrained, unshapped. The boy would be turned, or he would be destroyed. There would be no third path. On Hoth, the snow fell like silence, a planet without cities, without temples, yet still holy in its exile. The rebellion built their echo base into the ice, digging into the white like insects in a sleeping god. But peace is never more than breath deep. The Empire found them. They always do. Machines walked on metal legs, black and blind and vast. The sky fell in flames. The rebellion fled once more, carving freedom from retreat. And in the fire, Luke fell into his own journey. He heard Obi-Wan again. "Go to the Dagobah system. There you will find Yoda." The name meant nothing to him, but the voice was all he had left. So he flew to the swamps, a place without maps, a system forgotten by history. But the Force knew its shape. It twisted the fog. It breathed in the trees. Dagobah was alive and it remembered pain. There, Luke met a creature who did not speak like a master. Yoda was not what he imagined. Small, strange, hunched, a beast of riddles and hunger. But within his green eyes was the weight of centuries. His body was bent, but his mind was sharp. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had heard the voice of the Chosen One before it broke. He had trained Jedi and failed. Now he would train the son. Luke did not understand why he was chosen. Why him? Why now? He was not wise, not strong. He still trembled when he dreamed. He still saw the face of the man who killed his teacher. The machine in black dot, Vader dot. But Yoda did not teach through. Luke was the temple now, a living one. But he was not ready. Not truly. And yet the Force does not wait for readiness. A vision came. Pain, suffering, Han, Leia. A city among clouds. The future bleeding into the present. Luke felt it not in words, but in dread. He must go. Yoda begged him to stay. Obi-Wan now only a voice, pleaded for patience. If you leave now, you will destroy all for which they have fought. But Luke had his father's blood. He went anyway to beat ESPI, to betrayal, to truth. Chapter 12. The blade remembers the hand Bespin, floated in the clouds like a dream suspended between worlds, a city of gas and light. It was neither ground nor sky, but a fragile boundary. Here the fates gathered, and seen threads weaving a tapestry of sorrow and revelation. Luke came seeking refuge, but found instead the cold grip of destiny. The man who awaited him was no stranger. Han Solo, the rogue who fought without cause, but with heart. His capture was the Empire's cruel gift, a sacrifice demanded by shadows. Leia was captive, too strong, defiant, and burning with rebellion's fire. Yet her fate was tangled in the same web as Luke's. Vader waited, silent as death, patient as the grave. The mask hid not just his face, but 1,000 secrets. Beneath, a man torn by fire and chains, the machine of terror. The ghost of Anakin Dot, Luke faced him across the cold hall. The saber in his hand trembled not from fear, but from the weight of a legacy he had barely begun to understand. Obi-Wan lessons echoed in his mind, fragile as a whisper in a storm. Vader spoke then, voice low and cold. Join me, and together we can end this destructive conflict. Bring order to the galaxy, and together we will rule as father and son. The words struck like lightning, searing the boy's heart. A temptation older than time, the promise of power, of belonging, the echo of a love warped by darkness. But Luke was not yet the man he would become. The blade of his saber sang, his will flared. He refused, the duel began. Sabers clashed in bursts of light and shadow. Metal rang against metal. The hall echoed, with fury and pain. Each strike a question, each parry a plea. The fight was not just for survival, but for souls. Vader's skill was unmatched, shaped by years of battle and rage. Luke fought with desperation, with hope, with the fragile fire of youth. The machine pressed him back, step by step, until the boy fell. The Sith Lord raised his saber for the final blow, and then the truth shattered the silence. "I am your father," he said. The words hung in the air like a curse. The boy's world cracked, splintered, and fell away. The father he had mourned was alive, but not as he imagined. A monster, a prisoner of his own darkness. Luke could not believe it, denied it, cried out in shock and pain. But the truth was absolute. The blade remembers the hand that once held it. Vader's voice softened, a memory bleeding through steel. "Join me, and together we will destroy the Emperor. He has lied to you, to us. He fears your power." A flicker of hope, a crack in the night. The boy hesitated. The choice loomed like a chasm. Would he fall into shadow or rise from it? The battle was not over, but the night was. Luke leaped into the abyss, away from the monster and the man. He landed hard, broken but alive. The Empire's trap had sprung, but the rebellion endured. In the silence that followed, Leia's voice found him, a tether of light in the darkness. Her hope, his hope. The force bound them stronger than blood or steel, but the scar remained. The boy knew now that the path would not be easy, that the darkness was not an enemy outside, but a storm inside, that his father's hand had shaped the galaxy's fate, and his own hand would decide its end. Vader watched him fall, not with triumph, but with something older regret. The blade, remembers, and so must the soul. Chapter 13. The fire before the dawn. The darkness was not empty. It was waiting. After the fall at Bespin, the galaxy held its breath. The rebellion scattered like embers, fragile but alive. They were hunted by shadows older than any star. The Empire tightened its grip, wielding fear like a blade sharpened. On broken dreams, Luke fled to Yoda's refuge once more. The swamp wrapped around him like a shroud. The ancient master's eyes saw past his fear and doubt into the storm raging within. Ready are you. What know you of ready? For 800 years have I trained Jedi. My own counsel will I keep on who is to be trained. A Jedi must have the deepest commitment, the most serious mind. The lessons grew harder. The Force revealed its many faces, and dark, calm, and fury. Luke wrestled with the shadow in himself, feeling it pulse and beckon. Yoda's words carved into him like stone. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. But the boy was not yet free. The galaxy burned beneath the Empire's hand. Planets raised, systems silenced. The Force whispered a newer, gentle song, threading through the living and the dead. The balance had been broken, and now it was mended. But balance was not stillness. It was a current, a cycle without end. On Tatooine, the desert wind carried a softer memory. The boy who once gazed at stars now walked beneath them as a man who had embraced his destiny. He was neither Jedi nor Sith. He was both, and yet he was something more. The galaxy would heal. Slowly, pain would linger. Old wounds never truly closed, but the light would grow. The shadows would recede. Obi-Wan's voice echoed softly in the wind. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. Yoda's laughter, faint but alive, rippled through the swamps. The future was uncertain. The past was heavy, but the Force had found its rhythm again as sacred. Endless dance. Anakin Skywalker was gone. Darth Vader was no more, and in their place stood a story of fall and rise, of darkness swallowed by light, of hope forged in the fires of despair. The prophecy was fulfilled, not by power alone, but by love. The galaxy whispered in response. Balance had returned, and with it, a new beginning. Chapter 16. Echoes beyond the stars. Though balance was restored, the Force whispered. Secrets not all could hear. The galaxy's breath was heavy, as if the very fabric of existence trembled in the aftermath. Light and shadow danced, but neither fully claimed the void beyond the stars. In realms untouched by mortal sight, ancient echoes stirred, forgotten. Voices murmured from the depths of the unknown regions, where darkness older than the Sith slumbered. Beneath veils of shadow, the balance was but a ripple, a momentary pause before the tide returned. The Jedi rebuilt their order not as a fortress of dogma, but as a fragile flame against encroaching night. The scars of war remained etched in memory and flesh. New apprentices sought knowledge with caution, wary of the abyss within themselves. Luke stood at the center of this fragile dawn, a teacher and seeker, the weight of his lineage heavy, yet tempered by hope. His gaze turned to the stars, wondering what lurked beyond the edge of known space. The Force's whispers grew louder, shaped by unseen hands. They spoke of cycles unbroken, of destinies intertwined. The fall of one darkness often birthed another. Balance was not a destination, but a ceaseless journey. In the shadows, remnants of the Empire festered. Hidden lords, cloaked in ambition and hatred, gathered strength in silence. They called themselves the First Order, an echo of old evils. Twisted and hungry, the galaxy's wounds were deep, and some had not yet healed. Leah, now a general, bore the burden of this new threat. Her heart was torn between hope and fear, love and loss. The legacy of Skywalker was both sword and shield, blessing and curse. Vader's redemption had not erased the past. It had illuminated the path forward, but not without cost. The Sith's shadow lingered in secret. Sith holocrons whispered false prophecies. Dark temples waited, forgotten by time but alive in dread. The Force was restless. The cosmic dance continued, and somewhere, in the silence beyond the stars, a new spark was born. The story was not finished. It was only beginning. Chapter 17. The return of the darkness. Darkness is patient. It waits in shadows, in silence, in places where hope is thin and fear grows like a weed. The First Order rose not with thunder, but with a whisper, a secret stirring beneath the ashes of the old empire. They gathered in hidden corners, far from light, where ancient Sith teachings had been buried deep. Forbidden knowledge twisted in their hands, promises of power and vengeance. Their leader was a shadow made flesh, cloaked in black, his face masked, his presence a void that swallowed light. A successor to Vader's legacy, yet something far more terrible, Kylo Ren. He carried the burden of blood and hate, torn between the darkness and a flicker of light within. His soul was a battleground where past and future clashed. The galaxy, weary from war, trembled but was slow to awaken. The scars of rebellion ran deep, and many hoped peace had finally come. But the darkness never truly dies. It waits, it watches. Returns. The Jedi, still fragile and few, felt the disturbance but were unprepared. Their ancient order had fractured, weakened by time and fear. The teachings of old were clouded by doubt. Luke Skywalker, burdened and exiled, sensed the rising storm but sought refuge in isolation. His faith faltered, his hope wavered. Leia fought to hold the light against overwhelming odds. The new war was not just of blasters and battles, but of souls and secrets. As the darkness spread, the galaxy braced for a reckoning. The cycle was unbroken. The prophecy whispered once more, not in words, but in dread. The fall and rise of the Chosen One was not a single flame, but a never-ending fire. The darkness was returning, and the stars awaited the next spark. Chapter 18. The last hopes, lighting the vast silence between stars. Hope flickered, fragile flame amid the endless night. The galaxy's children scattered, carrying the legacy of light and shadow, of sacrifice and redemption. Luke, burdened by failure and loss, stepped from exile. His steps were slow, his heart heavy, but his resolve unbroken. The Jedi Order would rise again, not as a monument of the past, but as a beacon for the future. Leia stood beside him, unyielding, a warrior of spirit and steel. Her voice was the rallying cry for those who dared to dream of freedom once more. The new generation emerged from the ashes, faces unknown, but hearts fierce. They carried no legends, only the raw, unshaped power of the Force. Their journey was just beginning. Kylo Ren, the darkness embodied, struggled within himself. The legacy of Vader's blood pulled him both toward destruction and salvation. The path was perilous, and the choice uncertain. The balance remained a fragile dance of tension between shadow and light, between despair and hope. The Force whispered ancient truths, veiled in mystery. The Chosen One's story was not one of endings, but of cycles and endless turning of the cosmic wheel. The galaxy held its breath, for the last hope was alive, and the light still burned, but in the heart of all things, beneath the silence, the Force awaited the final choice, the destiny not yet written. Chapter 19. The Eternal Author. Force is endless. It flows through time like a river, without beginning or end. Light and dark swirl in ceaseless motion, each birthing the other, each consuming and renewing. The story of the Chosen One is not a single thread, but a tapestry woven across eons. Anakin Skywalker rose from ashes, fell into shadow, and was reborn in flame. His path carved the fate of a galaxy, but did not end with him. The legacy of struggle, of hope and despair, echoes beyond the stars. New faces will rise, new destinies will be forged. The darkness will return, the light will answer. The cycle continues. Balance is not a moment frozen in time. It is a dance, a song sung in whispers and roars, in victory and defeat, in birth and death. The galaxy is a vast stage, and the Force its eternal actor. From the ashes of one saga, another begins. The prophecy is not prophecy, it is warning, promise, a curse, and a blessing. The Force remembers all, and waits patiently for the next spark. Chapter 20. The Whisper of Tomorrow Beyond. The veil of time, beyond the reach of stars. The Force speaks. Its voice is a whisper, soft as the breath of ancient winds. It tells of endings, and beginnings hidden within them. The tale of Anakin Skywalker is but one melody in an endless symphony. The galaxy turns, ever onward, its fate bound to the eternal dance. In the silence between heartbeats, new voices stir, new souls awaken to the call of the Force. Some will walk in light, others will embrace shadow, all will be tested. The past lingers, a shadow and a guide. The scars of history are etched deep, but they are not chains, they are lessons. The prophecy is incomplete, its final verses are yet to be written by those who come after. The galaxy waits for its future, for its hope, for its reckoning, and in the deepest darkness, there is always a whisper, a promise, a spark. Tomorrow.